There's even stories of them handcuffing women to the stoves, and in the White House. What JFK or Nixon or someone, like I said, they had taken over the White House sometime between 1920 or 1917 or something like that. I mean 1920 and 1930 or 1940. So they had women handcuffed to the stoves. Like I said, they were raping women and torturing Chinese and Germans inside of the White House. So, like I said, the White House used to have a German and 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 uh, and Chinese staff, maybe even a Russian staff was somewhere around in there. Anyway, though, it used to have a multicultural staff of Germans and Russians and Chinese. And then when JFK moved in there, or when they moved in there, they were basically just using the White Star submarines as pirates, basically. And so they even had, after they tortured the staff and everything else like that, he moved on to basically, like I said, they would fire shells right into Washington, D.C. from the cannon. Fire one! They were driving around on the streets in tanks, tearing up the streets. And I was, I'd pay for a street to be paved, and they would say, "Oh, the potholes in Washington are the worst ever." And it's like, what the hell? I just had that paved. I even said, I was like, "What? I just had the street paved." And that's when people told me, "Well, they're driving the tanks around, and they tear up the streets." Like, what? Why are there tanks driving around my streets of Washington? Anyway, and that's when I found out about some of the stuff. Anyway, though, so yeah, JFK, Nixon, those people were driving around tanks around downtown Washington D.C. from the White House because there used to be a whole line. The Panzers. There was a whole line of tanks there in Washington D.C. In fact, there was a tank proving ground just behind the White House. Anyway, it's where the Germans used to mess around with tanks and stuff like that, and just improve them and create and build them better. Anyway, though, eventually they were basically holding all of Washington hostage, and like I said, they had women handcuffed to the stoves and basically raping women inside that little outside building, or whatever. It used to be a horseshoe shop and basically a wagon manufacturing place. They used to build wagons there. Anyway, they had taken it over and basically had women handcuffed to the stoves and were raping them and expecting them to cook dinner, handcuffed to a stove. And it's basically just hell. The whole building. Like, it's my building. It's my house. So anyway, though, so apparently, without me around or without people knowing that it was my building or my house, that basically they were handcuffing people to the stove, calling them spies or whatever, and basically shelling all of Washington. Like I said, Washington wasn't. They would say, "Oh, the damn Reds, they bombed us," and blah blah blah, and blaming the damage inside the towns, on the what's it called, on some other foreigner or whatever. And it was just JFK and the tanks. They would just drive up to a store and be like, "Give me your stuff," and point the cannon right at the tank. And if they didn't, fire one, right into the shop. So, and I was wondering why my shops were getting destroyed in Washington. I was like, what the going on down there? So people had to eventually start telling me about like the tanks driving around Washington. I'm like, what the? So because I mean, it's my country. It's my United States of America. So anyway, so I found out about a great many things that were going on in my country. Anyway, so, and that would lead to them wanting to kill me because, well, JFK, Richard Nixon, they weren't presidents or anything. So, and they were tearing up my city with my own tanks. So, anyway, and doing all kinds of other damage. So, anyway, eventually the people had to stop that. I think Germany or China had to move in, or Germany, I think it was Germany that brought tanks over and had to move in and start basically taking out the tanks of Washington. And then, of course, they claimed that Germany was attacking, of course, or someone was attacking them, but it wasn't. They weren't attacking; they were just stopping them from tearing up the city even more. So, anyway, because it's my country, well, I have that right, and I let them in. So, and that's where you get to basically Nixon or JFK like start using the tanks as basically a barricade, and getting fuel, and then going back to the town. So they took out the fuel depot, so they couldn't get any more fuel. Although I guess they had used up all the fuel at the White House because there used to be fuel tanks at the White House, so but they weren't that big. So anyway, and eventually they removed the tanks from the White House building, so the people of the White House couldn't use them anymore. So anyway, though, lots of things have happened at the White House that have been basically removed from basically record. But anyway, I knew of it though, and others would know of it though, as basically how Richard Nixon and JFK were basically destroying Washington from the White House. Anyway, and other countries had to deal with these people. And of course Richard Nixon or JFK would, oh, blah, 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 they're attacking us, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, they're defending the people of Washington, that were just basically settlers and people that lived there and just had shops there. And then these crazy psychopaths were basically attacking, saying, oh, it's our right to use our tanks in our own country. It's like, no, it's not. So anyway, it was basically just a bunch of people with tanks, driving around Washington, just tearing up the streets and destroying buildings. Anyway, yeah, and then handcuffing women to the stove or raping them in the building, and basically using machine guns or Gatlings to defend the house, like as if someone was. It's like they're not attacking you; they're just trying to get the women. Anyway, so because they're tired of hearing the screams of help and stuff like that coming from the White House. So anyway, all this stuff was happening, and basically it's how the White House and pretty much the current administrations are basically shit with little legs. They're little piles of shit with legs, pretty much. And they've been shit with little piles of with little legs this whole entire time. So, and basically they always knew it and they didn't care. So anyway, they apparently they've stopped killing people around Washington and moved out to other countries, claiming that they're whatever, or basically the Democrats and Republicans basically using the firearms to basically kill people and basically try and subvert people, and they're not Lucifer Star, they're not related to stars, they're not related to anyone more than they basically got access to some guns and started killing people. And then shooting down aircraft and all that. It's how the White House has basically always been the terrorist group this whole entire time. And pretty much the rest of the planet has been defending itself from the real terrorists, which are basically the White House and pretty much John McCain and Jimmy Carter and all of them, which are the terrorists of the planet Earth, pretty much, and the worst people that have ever been on this planet. So, and they've been using my aircraft to basically bomb other countries and basically laugh. Basically, because it's supposed to be my White House and all that, but it wasn't. But it was taken over by them at some point in time. Pretty much, while they tried to figure out a way to kill me. So, which were they were raping women inside of the White House and raping women inside of the things. I guess nowadays they give drugs to people or something like that to get their sex. But basically, the Republicans and the Democrats, the people of Washington, D.C. have always been the worst people ever. Pretty much. And the rest of the world has been defending itself from these crazy-ass people. So, anyway, yeah. It's basically where America went bad. But it wasn't really America. It was actually Jimmy Carter, Richard Nixon, and a bunch of other people that were just at the Washington, D.C. building got access to some tanks. And then tried to start an army, and have been trying to start an army to basically further the Republican or Democratic cause. That began somewhere around Roosevelt or something like that. I don't really know. Anyway, where the IRA and everyone else has basically been defending from these psychopaths. Like, oh, there comes another one. And basically it's just the psychopaths of the American government, which has been psychotic since day one. So, anyway, yeah. So, Richard Nixon and JFK, John McCain, they basically put their friends into battleships or ships and basically had them going out and destroying things and stealing cargo from ships. And basically it's where they basically been bad this entire time. And finally stopped destroying Washington and actually started destroying other countries. So anyway, and that's basically what the Republicans and the Democrats, the aristocrats, they try and say aristocrats or whatever, have been doing. So anyway, yeah, because I own America and I'm here. So anyway, yeah, but people don't officially know that. So anyway, and that's how basically this country went psychotically, terribly, and basically became a terrorist organization.